Hey everyone, welcome to the Grief Informed podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Garcia, and this is a place where I bring you authentic conversations with people who are willing to share their journey through seasons of grief. No matter your cultural upbringing, societal conditioning, or faith practice, grief affects us all. Whether you're dealing with a loss, a diagnosis, a broken heart, or the everyday stressors of life, or love someone who is, these conversations are here to support you in that process. So be sure to check out the show notes for potential trigger warnings. And whether you're very comfortable with or deeply avoidant of grief and its many responses, you are welcome here. Thank you for being here, and now on to the episode. Hey everybody, welcome to the Grief Informed podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Garcia, and today I have with me Don Wendorf, who has the amazing privilege. I've known him. He has the amazing privilege of knowing me, but I've known him we didn't even do the math there. I over 20 years that I've known.
Long time, yeah.
Known Don from his sons and friendship that I've had with them through the years. Don was a psychologist and licensed marriage and family therapist for 45 years. He has since been retired for 10 years, is the author of 2 books, one called Caregiver Carols and Love Lyrics. Hi, Don. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Welcome to my home.
Yes, and I should say,
how was dinner?
It was amazing. Y'all fed me, but when I got here, and not just fed me, but fed me tamales and pozole.
Pozole, yeah.
Oh my goodness, it was so, and fruit, fresh fruit. Very southern.
Chilton County peaches.
Yes.
They ain't none better.
That is correct. It was a lovely dinner, and then we talked and did the entire podcast.
Right.
So we're just turning on the mics and doing it again.
I'm going to bed.
So, Don, tell us a little bit, to get to know you, for others listening, a little bit about your cultural upbringing and background.
I didn't have no cultural upbringing. We didn't have any culture in my family. I guess probably the one characteristic that would epitomize my childhood and the environment was that I was an Army brat. Okay, and both sides of my family, my father's family and my mother's family, were full of military people. And so what that meant was that we moved every couple of years. So I've lived all sorts of different places. A couple of years in France. I have a 6-year-old's memory of France.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's worth a lot. And my father was a colonel in the Army, and he went to West Point, and then went to, after the war, he was a vet. The Army sent him through Yale Law School, so he was a law professor.
Oh, wow.
For more years than he was in the Army. And we moved back after he retired from the Army to his home, basically, Waco, Texas. His parents were still there living in West, a little town where Pop grew up, about 15 miles from Waco. So that was the longest I spent anywhere in the same place, going all the way through high school and college in Waco, Texas. Went to Baylor.
Okay. And what brought you to Birmingham, Alabama?
Yeah. Well, I first did graduate school at Vanderbilt and did not like their program. I worked for 3+ years in a state psychiatric hospital in Nashville. 2 years as a conscientious objector, which was interesting in my military family. That was back in Vietnam days. Then I went back to Baylor and did graduate school again to get my doctorate. And then the last year of graduate school is a year of internship, and you apply for those all over the country. And UAB has a history of taking Baylor PsyD, Doctor of Psychology students. So I came here to do a 1-year internship in 1976, and I never could find the way out.
Yes. Okay. So you've been here since 1976.
Yeah. First, I was on the faculty. A position came open in the Department of Psychiatry. I was a psychologist within the Department of Psychiatry, just as I finished up the internship, and I took that position and was there for a few years. And then my brother My identical twin brother, Bob, moved over from Austin, where he had been working, and he was, of course, also a psychologist, and he worked out at the East Side Mental Health Center and then started a private practice. And so I left UAB and went into private practice with Bob. And so most of my career I was in a private practice with Bob and a couple of other people.
What was the name of that practice?
Family Therapy Associates.
And not Wendorf and Wendorf?
No. We were all, family therapy was a sort of a new developing specialty area about that time, and we were all very interested in family therapy and bought ourselves a lot of extra training in that because most graduate schools weren't doing that yet. But it was a different way of viewing problems and viewing solutions and working as therapists. So I helped get the licensure for marriage and family therapy here in this state.
Wow.
Well, yeah, I did it all by myself.
I'm close enough to pat your back.
No, we worked for years to get that.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
Well,
and that was my specialty, was family therapy and marriage therapy particularly.
right.
Yeah.
Okay. And my normal question, I forgot to ask if you know, do you know your Enneagram number? Do you know the Enneagram?
42.
Stop. There are only 9 numbers, so clearly you don't know your Enneagram. That's okay. That's fine for another day. 42.
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Oh, okay. Was that okay? I'm sorry, I missed
It's
the
the
reference.
ultimate answer, which is useless unless you know the ultimate question.
Right. I'm sorry. I missed the reference. And I think you told me that reference before the last time when I asked you.
Yeah, but nobody listens.
I did.
When I talk, they don't listen.
Okay, so you do this work for 45 years, and then you retire. You've been retired for 10 years. What brought you to retirement?
I reached the age that I could get Social Security. No, I did. That was part of the decision making about that. But my late wife, Susan, the mother of
The two boys.
the two crazy boys, you know, she had, we first, for about 5 years, thought she had Alzheimer's. It turned out she had vascular dementia. But I retired to be her full-time caregiver instead of just, evenings and weekends.
Yeah.
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 Once I was able to do that financially with Medicare and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So tell us about Susan's diagnosis and that process of becoming her caregiver. Like, what's that story through there?
Yeah, because there were many years leading up to that period of retirement. I mean, we had noticed that many years earlier. She got the diagnosis of Alzheimer's, which really fit with the information, the symptoms, and the technology for figuring out what that was all about. There are kinds of scans available now that were not available then, and that sort of thing. But she was showing those kinds of symptoms, a lot of memory issues and stuff. She would get lost driving. She came back home to Homewood from her dentist by way of Sylacauga.
Oh.
Yeah, we knew that one right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And she would go through the same sort of litany of questions every day. How old was I? How old was she? How long had we been married? How old were the boys? All of these kinds of things. So we were seeing a lot of memory kinds of stuff. And like I say, the diagnosis was a reasonable one. It was just wrong. And eventually, we found out that she was having little strokes, and then eventually bigger and bigger, and not little at all strokes, as a result of antiphospholipid antibody syndrome, which is a rare disease I had never heard of. It was diagnosable by a simple blood test. It's a lupus kind of factor.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so how old was she when she was diagnosed with that?
You don't
remember? Okay.
I don't do those
Yeah.
things.
I can't pull that information.
My mind doesn't work that way.
Okay. Yeah. So she was diagnosed with that. And then from that moment until her passing was how long? About 10 years?
More like 15.
15.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and the dementias are progressive neurodegenerative diseases. So it's not like one day you get the diagnosis and boom, that's the end of everything.
Right.
You live, and unfortunately you eventually die with these diagnoses. But she was able to drive for a while. She really stopped driving more because of visual loss than
the
memory kind of stuff. Yeah, and she actually made some improvement the first couple of years on memory, because after strokes you get some spontaneous kind of improvement, just because the blood clot gets out of there and the cells recover some.
Yeah. So you, from that time for the 15 years, you weren't the primary caregiver. At what point in that stage did you become the primary caregiver?
Primary, if you mean, full-time, round the clock, 24/7, that when I retired.
When you retired, okay. And that lasted how long?
That didn't last too long. That was less than 2 years before she died.
Okay, okay. So you were able to have support through outside support or caretakers or what was allowed through insurance?
Well, yeah, insurance didn't any help on that, but for a while I was able to, in very early stages, I was able to sort of take care of her by phone. And, the boys were around, very busy, of course, but they were around. And so a lot of help from sons and daughters-in-law and, that kind of stuff. But then the pastor of her church arranged for a group of ladies who offered to take care of her all day long while I worked.
Oh, wow.
And they did that for a couple of years for nothing.
Wow.
Yeah. And then I had to hire help from agencies. And we did that for a few years. So we limped along, with that for a good while.
Okay. And then it went to you full time. You retired from your job.
Right.
It's a huge adjustment in and of itself, coming into retirement. And then you're in caretaking.
Yeah. And of course I've been doing that weekends and evenings and mornings for years already. But it's a constant new learning and new adaptation, because things are changing all the time. And you're gradually losing so many abilities, capabilities, aspects of the relationship. It's a gradual loss all the time. So you're constantly grieving. This is a grief podcast. You remember that?
Yeah, it is. We can talk about that too.
And so there's you're adjusting to that, and you're handling the emotions that go with all of that for years and years. But then, when you're doing it full time, it's like there's always a little piece of your brain that's on, and thinking, what do I got to do next? Did I do this? What if I forgot that? The what ifs get you.
Yeah.
What if this gets worse? What if she can't do this? What if I don't know what to do about that? What if?
Right.
So for me, there was a fair amount of worry and anxiety about all of that. But you learn how to handle and sometimes the tough way. And there's now a lot of information out there. There's Alz Authors, for example, is a group that has books by, I don't know, Linda, how many people? Hundreds of people? They've got hundreds of books that give advice. When I was first getting into that, there wasn't much out there about how to do this. So it's kind of trial and error and do what you can.
Yeah.
Talk to people who've been there and figure out what you can do and say, well, that didn't work. Now what?
No, yeah. Which you got to that place, and you said writing the book, The Caregiver Carols, was for you as much as it was for other people through the process of...
It really was. The first thing they told me, and the first thing that I tell anybody who is getting into the caregiver role, is first and foremost, you've got to take care of yourself. If you don't, burnout is all too real. It's all too easy to get. felt like I got burned out, and I knew about burned out. I told my clients about burned out.
Yeah.
Burnout and what to do about it. And I was doing all sorts of good, healthy things to take care of myself. And it's still very, 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 how many is that? 3? Very, 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 very hard.
Right.
It's very hard and it's very wearing. So, I tried to keep my, at that point, now I'm mostly just a hiker, but I kept my running up. I played music, and I told the bands that I was in, guys, there's some limits to what I can do and what I can't do.
Right.
But I kept my music alive as best I could.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tried to take care of myself. But this was sort of how do you deal with the emotional kind of stuff.
That you were writing about.
Yeah. For example, I knew that I was getting, over the course of time, more and more irritable. And grouchy, and sometimes just out and out mad. I threw a temper tantrum one time in my living room, and I threw stuff around the living room. I threw pillows because I had a whole bunch of instruments in
like
the
you
room,
do now,
like I do in the living room here, and I didn't want to hurt any of my
There's
instruments.
2 banjos,
So
a
there was,
mandolin.
even when you get real, real angry, there's some degree of control there.
Right.
But I threw a temper tantrum, and after I finished, I felt a little better. And Susan looked at me and said, "Well, you threw? That all you got?" Yeah. But what I came to realize is that a lot of my anxiety and a whole lot of my irritation and grouchiness and anger were cover-ups for other feelings.
Yeah.
Particularly because I'm dealing with the loss. So it's cover-up for sadness. In other words, it was grieving. See how I got us back?
I do. I like that.
Right
You are very talented.
Yeah. It was a cover-up for grieving. And, men are particularly good at using anger to deflect and not have to deal with other emotions. But we don't have a monopoly on it. And there's some women that are real good at it.
Yeah.
But that's what it was.
Yeah.
Well, it's things like that I wanted to try and help other people realize. Okay, let's understand what's going on. Let's look at this. And the same thing with things that are going on with the person that you're taking care of with dementia. There's a tendency in our better living through chemistry kind of culture to deal with everything with medication.
Yeah.
Well, there isn't a medication for Alzheimer's that affects the disease process. There's some that help with functioning for a while, and now there are just now coming out a couple of medications that actually affect the disease process itself in early stages, or even before it's labeled Alzheimer's, while it's still called MCI, mild cognitive impairment. And I'd like to beat up the guy that named him that, because there's nothing mild. Yeah, mild. Give me a break. Nothing mild about it. So at any rate, if you understand what's going on and you can get into the mind and the perceptions and the feelings and the thinking of the person that you're taking care of, a lot of things can be handled just with common sense, reasonable kind of stuff.
Yeah. And you're talking about, you said the first to you, because I'd asked this earlier, what was number one piece of advice for those that are caretakers, and you said taking care of yourself, and that number 2 was, you named it, person-centered care, and that was part of that.
Yeah,
off of that.
This is a relatively, in the last couple of decades, recent way of looking at taking care of somebody with dementia and looking at dementia itself. And to some extent, it's a belief as much as it is scientifically validated, but it kind of grew out of a school of thought that a lady named Naomi Feil, what was she, Linda? Social worker? Social worker. Developed.
And just so everybody knows, we'll time out here and say Linda, who he's talking to, he's not making up characters.
Linda is my lamp. I just talk to the lamp, and
Linda, who is so kindly said we can do the podcast, but she does not want a microphone that I do have with me. She does not want any part of it, but she is just off center, giving him information. This is his wife that you have remarried,
right.
Linda, and which their story and how they met is absolutely precious, and we'll get to that. But okay, so what was the question you asked, Linda? I wanted to introduce her off mic.
Yeah, and we were getting into the person-centered care.
Yes, the name of the lady who.
Yeah, Naomi File.
Naomi File. Uh-huh.
And if you want to see an absolutely brilliant example of empathy and sensitivity and ability to connect, go to YouTube and pull up Naomi File, F-E-I-L, and her conversation with a lady named Gladys. This is a lady who was in late stages of dementia, hadn't talked to anybody in probably years, all curled up in bed, basically, incontinent, had to have absolutely everything done for her. And Naomi was able to reach her.
Yeah.
It's amazing, because she believed there's a person, the person who is Gladys is still in there.
Yeah.
Somewhere, and there's all sorts of cognitive and communication limitations and all this other stuff going on that makes it very difficult.
Right.
But if I can read what's going on with her and respond appropriately and properly, we can have a connection. It won't be the connection we had 30 years ago,
Right.
but we can have some kind of connection. So that's the idea. The belief is that person is still in there. And instead of just focusing on what that person can no longer do,
Right.
that's real evident. I don't have to, it doesn't take much work to see that. That's right there. I'm going to look at what they still can do. And she is able to understand some of what's going on with Gladys, who at that point where she's dying, she wanted her mom.
Yeah.
They ended up singing a hymn together.
Yeah. I love that. And you said it was a Christian hymn. And
Well, Naomi's Jewish,
Yeah.
but she knew the Christian hymn
Yeah.
and sang it with Gladys.
That is empathy.
Yeah. Keep your Kleenex handy.
Yeah. So sweet. I will be able to link that, actually, that video. I'll find it and put it in the show notes so people can see
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
That's powerful. And that person-centered care, you mentioned an example of looking at the behavior from, okay, what could be in their environment, what they might be experiencing. And you gave the example of they're giving you a hard time.
Yeah. Particularly, there's a phenomenon that anybody who works in a memory care unit can talk about called sundowning. Whereas, the sun is going down, it's getting later in the day. Some people with dementia become very agitated, and they seem to be kind of resistant and grouchy and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you realize that every single thing that person did and thought all day long was 5 times as hard for them as for anybody else.
Yeah.
They didn't do it on autopilot. It's
Right.
very tired. Well, don't you reckon they might be just a little bit tired
Right.
when you get to be in the evening? I mean, all of us are kind of tired. At the end of the day, we're kind of letting down.
Yeah.
That's the time when kids...
Meltdown hour.
Meltdown hour.
Yep.
You're home. You got to get the supper on the table, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So you learn how to deal with that.
Yeah.
Or people that get labeled as wanderers.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we have to be real careful with him. He's a wanderer. So, make sure the door's locked and all that kind of stuff. Well, every day he wakes up in what to him is a new place.
Yeah.
With new people. He doesn't know who they are. He doesn't know why they're there. He may not even be totally sure of who he is. He may not recognize his face in a mirror anymore. Maybe he's trying to find a way to get home.
Right. Yeah.
So come at it from that point of view rather than giving them a bunch of pills.
Yeah. Yeah. When you said he's not giving you a hard time, he's having
a
a hard time. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a better way of coming at things, is saying, he's having a hard time. How can I help?
Yeah.
You know, I know about helping people. How can I help with that?
Right.
Yeah. And there are times and kinds of dementia where some medication is very much needed and in order.
Right.
So that's not a blanket kind of a thing.
Right. Right.
But at least first come at it from what can the person still do? Who is the person in there? For yourself as a caregiver, I think it's very helpful to have things that help you remember. Say you're taking care of your spouse, you know, who that person is. Why did you fall in love with them and stay married to them for 40 years in the first place?
Right.
You know, well, if that person is still in there, what reminds you of that? What brings that to your mind? How do you hold that image or that memory so that you look for that and you find it and you connect with that?
Yeah.
You know, and I think different people have different ways of doing that. With Susan, I actually wrote a couple of songs about that had a metaphor for who her personhood was all about. You know, what was her person? You know, the Quaker hymn "Simple Gifts," for example, epitomized her. She was an extremely supportive person, and she did that in a quiet sort of way by just doing little simple things. And I wrote a song called "Painted Bits of Bark and Stone and Tin," because when I first met her, that's what she'd do. She'd write little supportive notes to people on just a piece of bark she'd find or an old tin can lid that, you know, was all rusty, and she would hide it, and you'd find it.
Aww.
Simple gifts.
Yeah.
And then I wrote that song. I actually wrote that before she died, and she got to hear it, and she liked it. But that, for me, you know, when she was being so, what I perceived and experienced as being resistant or belligerent or angry or grouchy or, you know, those kinds of things, I could remember that's not who Susan is. So what's going on here?
Yeah.
You know? And she was able, pretty much up until the end, her communication abilities were pretty good. Sometimes they were too good.
The filter is gone.
Yeah. I was able to ask her about some of that, and she was. It was at a moment where, you know, I wasn't getting irritated at her. You know, like she couldn't walk without my giving massive assistance. I'd have to pull her out of the chair. I would have to muscle her step by step. So I'd say, okay, we got to get up now. We got to go. You know, put your nightgown on or whatever it was.
Yeah.
She'd say, now. No, yesterday at 3. Yes, of course. Now I'm standing right. You know, and I'd be getting irritated and stuff, and I would ask her, why, you know, why does she do that?
Yeah.
She knows she's going to have to get up. I'm standing there. I'm grabbing her, you know, by the side to pick her up, and she said, all day long, I'm scared.
Yeah.
Everything I do, I'm scared. I'm afraid I'm going to fall. I'm afraid I'm going to hurt you. Not just herself.
Right.
She's afraid she's going to hurt me. She's protecting me.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That put it in a different light. And I didn't always remember that, but I tried to have things like that and I had told people, try and have something like that. You know, that helps you remember who that person is before we hit the limitations of the dementia and the wearing down that happens with everybody by going through this and being, you know, spending years being taken care of and dependent and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Who is that person?
Yeah.
And yes, you've lost a lot, and you know, but you haven't lost it all. There's stuff there. And back to the, you know, the person-centered care, the belief is that's always there.
Yeah.
That's always there, and it's your job to figure out how to reach it and how to connect with it and how to make sense of it and how to help people to do as much as they can do, including communicate with you. So that's the whole, that's the person centered.
Right.
It means developing a lot of empathy.
Yeah.
Get inside somebody else's skin.
Yeah. You had quoted the To Kill a Mockingbird.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
What was that one?
Well, where Atticus is talking with Scout, and he says, you know, Scout, you'll find you get along a whole lot better with people if you just climb inside their skin and walk around in there for a couple of days and see what the world is like and what it looks like and what it's like for them.
Yeah. And it seems that it would seem like what could prevent someone from getting to that level of empathy might be what could be stuck with their own anger and their own grief. As you said, what's underneath that anger is your own grief. That
Sure. And acknowledging and dealing with this is what I've lost, this is what I'm losing, this is what I'm probably going to be losing in the future.
Right.
Because it's an everyday thing.
Yeah.
You're grieving for years. So is the person who has the dementia.
Yeah.
And this is not true. This is true not just for people with dementia. It's for people who are losing any kind of capabilities or abilities or you know, things about themselves and their identity. They're grieving too.
Yeah.
Not everybody with dementia is aware that they have dementia, but probably more people are than aren't.
Yeah.
You know, and so they're very aware of all of those changes and what they can do and what they can remember and how they can, you know, we all know the frustration of we're looking for a word and trying to, oh, you know, what is that, the thing, you know, it's like blue and,
Yeah.
we all know that. But what if that's a constant kind of a thing and it's worse today than it was yesterday? And
Yeah.
it's going to be even worse still tomorrow.
And you can pick up on, clearly this is frustrating other people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that includes loss in the relationship. You know, the dynamics of a couple become rather different when one person is totally dependent on the other person.
Yeah.
You know, we talk about, instead of caregiver or caretaker, I'm not sure what the difference is between a giver and a taker, but a more modern kind of term for that would be care partner, because as long as you can,
Yeah.
and it's realistic and it's productive, you want it to be a partnership. So you want to involve that person in all the decisions and the planning, and you know, you want the doctors to talk to them, not just to you.
Right. Yeah.
So you want to make it a partnership, and that holds on to some of what your relationship was before. But like I say, it's a progressive kind of thing. So you're grieving the loss of that and all the different aspects of your relationship.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's part of grieving for everybody. I mean, anybody can tell you that after somebody dies, you know, you have that experience of you're reading something or you see something on TV or you think of something and you turn to the other one. Hey, did you see what that? Oh.
Yeah.
And you remember, oh, they're dead.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot. Do you, and then not just your care as a care person and being able to partner in that caregiving, you're also dealing with, at the time, your children's response to this process, and they're losing their mother and wanting to keep them involved in the decisions and the process as well.
Right.
And I can imagine, because I think of caregiving isn't just related to spouses. I mean, there's caregiving of parents, like when your parents are aging, and people of my age are entering into that. We're entering into caregiving for parents, and it's one of those things that we don't really talk about or know how to prepare for, other than we know it's going to happen. But the empathy seems like that's a common denominator that's needed.
Right.
Regardless. You mentioned those things about, we laughed earlier about mentioning that, they're not giving you a hard time, they're having a hard time, and that this approach it this way. And I said, well, that sounds a lot like that strategy could work for teenagers
Exactly.
and toddlers as well. Yeah. Right. It's empathy across the board for understanding where someone is coming from.
Yeah. And, you're talking about dealing with aging parents. Well, you're also a parent. You know that doesn't ever change.
Yeah.
I mean, in some ways, you're always a parent.
Mm-hmm.
Susan's mother on her deathbed was talking about one of her daughters who had died 40 years before.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and was very much on her mind as she was dying. My mother lost her first two children, and each lived 3 days and died in her arms. And those were real little people to her that she was still grieving for and talking about as real people and celebrating their birthdays when she died in her 90s.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, part of aging is losing stuff. And it's not a regular kind of game plan that everybody goes through. It's like grieving. Everybody grieves in their own sort of way, and it's different, and the issues are different. So, I mean, one of the surprising things to me about aging is that you would think it's sort of across the board, and it's not.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I don't have the agility and balance that I used to have.
Yeah.
But I can go out here. We did a little hike this morning. We hike every other day. We just hiked 3 miles, but I could go right now and hike 10 miles without batting an eye.
Yeah. Right.
And by the time you get to my age, I'm 33. By the time you get to my age,
okay,
you usually have acquired a handful of medical conditions, and so you never know.
Yeah.
Is it something that's medical? Something new?
Right.
Susan came up with a disease we'd never heard of. Or
she beat you. She won.
Yeah. Is it just normal aging?
Yeah.
It's hard to know what something is.
Yeah.
But you just know that things are changing. I think my ability as a musician is probably the best now that it's ever been in my life.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, I just stay away from audiences. And,
and you sound amazing.
Linda takes out her hearing aids, and I'm great.
You sound great. That's awesome. I love that. Oh, my goodness, which I might be able to convince you again to bring the banjo back around, but he did that before we started. But, yeah, so as you're aging, you're seeing that the music is great, but there are other things. So your hikes for 10 miles, you're great, cardiovascular, all the things, except you might lose your balance. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, okay. This starts off on another whole
tangent. We're taking a rabbit trail.
Right now, the emphasis in the field of dementia, and it's really true with any major disease, the best thing you can do is preventative. It's healthy lifestyle interventions.
Okay.
Remember I told you earlier that by the time we say somebody is diagnosed with Alzheimer's, they're in early Alzheimer's. They're not in early Alzheimer's. The disease process has been going for 20 years.
Wow.
So the best thing that anybody can do to most significantly lower their risk for all the dementias and for all major diseases, really, is healthy lifestyle kind of stuff. Exercise, a plant-based diet, handling stress, socialization, being involved with other people, rest, significant rest. I know you can get along on 4 hours a night, but you can't be healthy on 4 hours a night of sleep.
Right.
So, I mean, we know these kind of things. There's plenty of research on all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it makes it better, but you still age.
Right.
Cells are programmed to die. We all,
right.
Well, all y'all are going to die. Okay.
You're only 33. You've got way
I got
more
lots of time. Yeah. But you start all that stuff just like developing resilience and developing cognitive reserve that lasts you to help you function better with dementia for a long time beyond that is from constant learning. You start developing that when you're young. You don't wait until you're 76.
Yeah. Yeah. So you have to start now, because when are they seeing, the diagnoses of dementia? Like, when is that typically getting diagnosed right now?
Well, you can look at the statistics and stuff and say, what are your odds? Like, if you get to 85, there's statistically, you got like a 50-50 chance of having some kind of dementia.
Okay.
So age is one of the main risk factors. But there are children who get diagnosed with Alzheimer's. It's rare.
Wow.
There's an early onset diagnosis of Alzheimer's, which happens typically for people in their middle ages. But generally speaking, you're really talking about symptoms getting noticed when somebody is 60, 65, moving on up in those kind of. But like I said, the disease process has already been going on for a long time. There's a lot of damage. Part of what I feel gypped about is that I've been doing most of those healthy lifestyle things most of my adult life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And getting better and better at that.
Right.
Particularly with the diet. But the exercise, I never stopped running after track in high school. Nobody said, stop.
You just kept running.
I just kept running.
Like Forrest.
Yeah. And like Forrest Gump. Yeah. And I did that even when I was taking care of Susan. I would get up at like 5 o'clock in the morning, which was dark and cold in December, but I still have medical kinds of issues that I've got to deal with. So it's funny that I've got several things that could kill me.
Right.
I could keel over right before the end of the podcast. Then
wow.
What would you do?
I'm going to take that guitar and that one.
No, don't. Can't have that one. And yet I can, perform music. I can go hike. I can
live life.
I can use the new hedge trimmer I just got yesterday.
Oh, wow.
Which is really cool.
I've got a house you can use that at.
No, thanks. I should have gotten one of those years ago. Those are cool.
So, okay, to switch it, because I want to bring in how you met Linda. You are going through this process. We were talking about, okay, so anticipatory grief, when you've got, as a caregiver, that you are anticipating this person passing, but clearly you could never prepare. And in your case, it was you had the cards stacked against you because, as I understand, Susan prayed that she would die quickly, and she wanted to die.
She wanted to die. Her quality of life was pretty limited.
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty rough. She basically lived on Jane Austen and Willie Nelson videos.
It's a great combination.
Not necessarily at the same time. But yeah, she asked us all to kill her. And none of us were willing
to do that.
So yeah, it was obvious to me at one point that we needed to go down to the ER because she had another stroke. She'd had another setback in the limited abilities she had left. But I could see, okay, so we went down to the ER, and we've been through that routine. A lot of times they put you through the $1 million workup, and you get all kinds of scans and tests and stuff. And then in this case, they told us what we already knew, which was, she had another stroke. Okay, thanks. We know what the routine on that said. Whoa, we're not through. And they gave me this laundry list of all these other medical conditions that were not a part of her
dementia,
vascular dementia, or her stroke damage. She had lost most of her vision in the center of her, visual field, and couldn't walk, and all these kind of physical. She couldn't write anymore, which she hated that she couldn't write. All of these things that if they were not treated, she was going to die within a few days. Yeah. So, okay, now we're into shock.
Yeah.
And then they started telling us what all the different treatments would be, and they would be horrible.
Yeah.
I mean, this awful diarrhea, when does that go away? Never, because you have to do this forever.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
I mean, the treatments were horrible. The treatments were as bad as the problems. And it was easy for her. She knew what she wanted to do.
Yeah.
They said, we can help you have a pain-free, easy death within the next couple of days here in the hospital. So she knew what right away. It wasn't a hard decision for me because we've been having this conversation for years.
Right.
I knew what she wanted.
Right.
But we had to make sure because, she went down there and she was pretty confused, and sometimes people change their minds. And so we had to give her time to clear up. They gave her some symptomatic kind of medications to help her kind of clear up so we could be real sure when we talked with her that she still wanted that. That's exactly her wishes. And Paul was in McAllen at that point with his work, and David was here in town. So David, of course, immediately was down at the ER. And I engineered 2 or 3 different conversations as Susan cleared up so that the boys for sure heard that those were her wishes and could judge for themselves that she, given the circumstances, was very coherent, very clear. She knew what she wanted. But even so, I mean, that's a tough thing to come to grips with. And to me, she was very clear. That was an answer to prayer for her. Mm-hmm. She was very clear about that. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
So, now it's just me, and I'm feeling, I talked about how the grief is sort of cumulative. You deal with it a little bit every day, and it keeps going on and on and on. Then you had this shock because all of a sudden, one day to the next, I mean, I was fully prepared to take care of her the rest of her life. And I figured, other than she's lost some function, she's pretty strong and healthy. We're going to be doing this for probably another 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
And I was okay with that. I mean, that was what I signed on for. That's what I meant, and that's what I still meant. So, I was fully prepared. Well, all of a sudden, it's like, no, she's not going to be here day after tomorrow. And so I felt all kinds of stuff, just out of place, and didn't know what was going on. And now what do I do? And my entire routine was changed. Everything I did was all different. Now what do I do?
Yeah.
That sort of thing. And a lot of relief because, I was burned out. I was tired. My back was sore all the time from hauling her around.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of relief, and it's easy to feel bad about that and feel guilty about that. Like, they died. Why should you feel relief? You should be on the floor sobbing or something. Well, there's a lot of relief because it was very, very hard for her and for me. So this relief, not just for me, it's relief for her. She doesn't have to live that horrible life she's been living for all these years. So there was I'm glad for that, and I'm glad that my back is going to start feeling better.
Right. Both can exist at the same time.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's all of these different kinds of emotions. We talk about grief as if it's one simple little thing, and you go through the little stages of what was her name, Helen Kubler-Ross kind of thing, and boom, 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 and it's done, and you move on.
Yeah, no.
Well, that's not real life.
No.
Yeah, she identified a bunch of those things that you're likely to feel.
Right.
Denial and shock and sadness and anger and denial. All these different kinds of stages, which people thought that you had to do that in sequence.
Right.
Like how long do I get to do denial? You got about another 20 minutes.
Yeah. We got to move on to acceptance.
We got to move on to acceptance.
Yeah.
But it's not that way. I mean,
Right.
some of that happens all at once, and you go back and revisit earlier stages, and well, how long does how long do I have to grieve? How long does this last? How long you figure you'll live?
Right. Oh, yes.
Because in some ways, it's with you forever.
Forever.
You are changed. Your life has changed. A very real part. This is what we're into family therapy, systems theory. Okay,
Yeah.
who we are as people is not just defined by our epidermis.
Yeah.
Okay, who we are, and I don't mean this metaphorically or symbolically or allegorically or any one of those kind of things. Literally, who we are also includes our relationships and how we act and how we think and what we do and how we feel and all how we respond to things is in a dance with
Yeah.
other people.
Yeah.
So now your dance partner's not there anymore, but they are there, and you're changed, and they're there in your memory.
Yeah.
But you're living, and you have to keep on living.
Yeah.
So part of you has died.
Yeah.
So you have to make some changes in order to keep on living.
Yeah.
And you take all of that experience and those feelings and those memories and things with you and revisit them with different amount of intensity at different amount of times. But to some extent, it's always there. It's like Susan's mother talking about Lee's death 40 years earlier on her deathbed. It's always there.
Yeah.
So you learn how to deal with it. It isn't something you get over. It's something you move forward with.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And how comfortable you are in doing that will become evident once you're in it. But hopefully people will have examples like this, a podcast they've heard or a story of someone talking, giving them permission to experience grief in that way, to be able to experience it.
Yeah. Part of what I did as a part of my, moving forward and taking all that with me was, the song that I had written about Susan, The Painted Bits of Bark and Stone and Tin. There was this neurologist in Tuscaloosa, a guy by the name of Danny Potts, dear, dear friend of ours. I didn't know him then. And he knew somebody who I had mentored as a therapist. And they said, this neurologist and his partner, who's this lady out in California, are writing a book of meditations for caregivers, just as a supportive kind of a thing, but coming at it from a spiritual kind of point of view instead of just what do you do when they, whatever. Why don't you send them that song about Susan? I said, okay. The two editors were Danny and Linda, and they were ready to go to publication, and Danny didn't want to mess with it because it was Saturday night. It was a Bama game.
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide. And so he punted and gave it to Linda, and Linda called me and said, hey, we can take one more. Let's talk about this and how are we going to turn it into the part of this meditation sort of a deal, and because there's some prose with it. Those two books that I wrote were in song lyric form,
right?
And then with a little prose, explanation of what I was talking about, because I thought that would make it more accessible. At any rate, so she calls me up, and we're talking about this selection for 3 hours.
Sure.
And we just got to know each other a little bit as phone friends, and we did FaceTime, so I could see what
you're talking to me.
I saw that she had from the neck up. As far as I could tell, there was no. There wasn't anything else to her, but from the neck up, she was a real person.
Yeah.
And we just got to be friends. And I had already been doing a little bit of stuff with advocacy stuff, just giving talks or going to like Alzheimer's of Central Alabama is a
Yeah.
fantastic resource, and I had met them and doing that kind of stuff. So we just got to talking more and more, and I got to know her son a little bit. He was living with her at that point, or she was living with him, I don't remember which. And her husband had died with Alzheimer's, and she had moved back to California from Maryville, Tennessee. And I just liked her. We had so much in common, and we could approach things in a similar sort of way. And I was pleased that, my little song might be of some use to somebody, because it never made me a dime. And as that went on and on over a period of several months, we got to thinking, we probably ought to get together and see if there's any possibility that we might want to think about this going someplace else.
Yeah.
A more personal sort of relationship. And so there started a series of visits back and forth, and
Yeah.
Sure enough, we decided. And so within a couple of years, we had married, and she, unbelievably, I think it was a dumb move myself, but she decided that she would move
from California.
to Birmingham.
She was right there by Yosemite. You realize what she gave up, right?
She grew up going to Yosemite all
I
the
know.
time.
And as a hiker, you know?
Yeah, and two of my visits out to California were included Yosemite.
Yeah, nicely done.
Including with her son,
Yeah.
who, he was very easy to get to know, and I was very glad that I got to know Mike, one of the most supportive people I've ever known, ever.
Yeah.
Anywhere. I just loved Mike, and we lost him during our first year of marriage.
Wow.
Yeah. So, it was a good thing that we were married at that point, and we could share her grief at losing her son.
Yeah. Which you guys had been through so much already.
Yeah.
And
then we just really developed from there all of our advocacy kind of stuff. A lot of it through a network, a national network called Us Against Alzheimer's. But we edited a book on dementia-friendly worship. The idea being, how do you make your service, your church, your congregation, your ministerial staff aware of dementia and able to minister to people who are living with dementia, because they don't fit in very well in traditional services and things. It's too confusing, it's too loud, it's way too long, it's too verbal, that it needs to have more music. So at any rate, we edited, which is, like the old business of herding cats. This wonderful book with just wonderful, wonderful people that we've met, and we've helped edit some other people's books as we went along. So, and began giving talks and things like that, and eventually settled into kind of what our main ministry is at this point, which is through respite
care.
for people living with dementia, which I think is absolutely the most wonderful thing going. I think there should be a constitutional amendment that says there has to be a respite program within every 25-mile radius.
Yeah.
It's, I don't know if you want to get
well, no, and you said that
we're probably about 3 hours over your time limit already.
we are close to the time.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, your advocacy is amazing in the respite care, which was why you brought. I loved when we were talking about earlier the person centered care, and a lot of the things that you were saying were that's some of the training that people get when they are volunteering to be respite caretakers. Is you're teaching them how to be with people, because I'm going to circle back to something you said in our pre-recording conversation where we did the whole podcast and said, let's record again. Where you said that helping people learn how to engage. And what was the example? I'm trying to pull it back from memory, but you were basically saying if you could help people learn this, others might be willing to take time away, because they say they feel a lot of guilt when you ask a caregiver to take, like, hey, ask for help, get respite care.
Right.
And
Drop
they think,
your loved one off here for 4 hours.
Right. And they're like, but why? I'm the one that knows all their stuff. If I do that, it's more stress than it's worth. And you said you had a phrase, you're like,
well, I can remember, in fact, one of my poems or songs in the book is about being Superman. You think, I can do it all.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, who knows them better than me?
Yeah.
Nobody. Who can take care of them better than me? Nobody. You know, and I can do it all.
Right.
And take care of myself and write books and
Go
learn
running
to
and
play banjos and I can do all that. I'm Superman,
yeah.
which just ain't true.
Right.
And it's irrelevant. Even if it were true, it doesn't make any difference.
Yeah.
During that 4 hours, they don't have to have the absolute best care of anybody in the world.
Yeah.
They just have to have good enough.
Right.
And those are people that are trained. They know what they're doing. They're very experienced. Most of the volunteers, they're not caregivers, caretakers.
Yeah.
They're volunteers. Most of them have experienced a loved one with dementia themselves, or may be doing that now.
Yeah.
So, and they know how to focus on what people can still do.
Right.
And how to help that individual, which may be different from helping this other individual, to do that.
Yeah.
Because you approach different people in different sort of ways. You know, I know some people living with dementia. I mean, people living with dementia are people.
Right.
And they're different just like everybody else is. So I know some people, like in the respite programs, that just thrive on all of the people there and the busyness and the noise and the art that people have done hanging on the walls and stuff. And I know other people that would walk into that room and just shut down.
Yeah.
Because they're overwhelmed. But they know how to deal with all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And when you walk into a respite care program, the joy and the love are palpable.
Yeah.
You can feel it. Those people love each other.
Yeah.
And the people who are living with them, they love each other, assisting each other. It's an opportunity for them to do something meaningful in a competent way, sharing with other people, giving to other people.
Yeah.
Being themselves.
Yeah.
You know, well, wouldn't you want your loved one to have 4 hours a couple times a week of that?
Yeah. You
better believe it. And usually people come before they sign up. They come for several sessions anyway and sit with their person. And sometimes caregivers will come and stay for a session.
Yeah.
And so we do music. We do sing-alongs.
Yeah.
We don't do it for them.
Right.
We do it with them.
Yeah.
And that's part of the big new way of looking at dementia ministries is with, not for. You know, I started off when I was first doing the music kind of things, it was more like a performance. And they could sing along, and I would try and pick songs that they might know. Now, it is with. I'm looking for maximum engagement, stimulating old memories, stimulating stories, nostalgic kind of stuff, doing the songs, a wide range of stuff, things that they grew up with, old vintage rock and roll, popular songs, Que Sera, Sera.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's one we do that we talked about earlier. And I'm looking for maximum involvement and honoring and eliciting and supporting personhood. That's the goal of the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, it's not just sing along. I get tired of "You Are My Sunshine" real fast.
Yeah.
So some of the songs that we do are pretty challenging.
Yeah.
And we've got the lyrics up on a big screen, and I've got I do a slideshow.
Yeah.
With all sorts of images. A lot of them are funny, but some of it's trivia or information. See?
Yeah.
Okay, what's the other song that guy made a hit off of?
Yeah.
Sounds very much like this. What? Anybody know?
Right.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah. And that gets them.
Because I'm looking for maximum stimulation, maximum engagement. I'm teasing people. I say, pull your chair up a little closer. I can't torment you from that distance.
Well, you are so incredibly witty. Like that's known that you are such a quick-witted humorist and thinker. So I would imagine you're amazing at that.
I'm thinking of something to say. Yeah, but I also have to remember all the time that these are people living with dementia. They have cognitive and communication kind of disabilities. A lot of them are in wheelchairs. So yeah, I do, and they're at very different levels.
Yeah.
I mean, we have people who really can't. Sometimes they can't have a conversation with you. But you start singing those songs.
Yeah.
They sing every word. They're on pitch. They're in rhythm. But you got people at different levels. So I have to be careful too with what I do. It has to be pretty exaggerated so people know that I'm just being silly and outrageous about it. You know, like somebody will start off singing before we're ready to sing. You know, I haven't even hit the intro yet.
Yeah.
And this song features a solo by John. John, come stand up here on the piano, and everybody give him a hand now. He's a little shy, but bring him on up. Yeah, I do a lot of performing. It's a lot of comedy improv, but I want them to respond. It's not. I don't want it to be a performance. So I'm trying to do it in a way that elicits something from them. And my favorite times is when I'll tease somebody and they'll send it right back at me double.
Yes. Oh, I love it.
I just eat that up.
When they can zing you back.
Zing me back and better.
Yeah. Oh,
and it's very surprising. And you know, we were talking about that earlier too. Music and the expressive arts in general. I mean, it's true also for dance and visual art, painting and stuff like that. The expressive arts, but particularly music, have an enormous power. And partly it's because music, for example, taps more brain area, more brain connections and networks than probably any other activity you can think about. If it's as much a whole brain activity as there is.
Yeah.
Okay. Which is, it's a different memory system.
Right.
I mean, it's part of what explains how we see this all the time. Somebody that you really can't have much of a conversation with, they have too much trouble with aphasia, word finding aphasia. They can't find the words to put into, you know, what they're trying to say. Can sing along with you just great. And that carries over for a while.
Yeah.
They may be able to have a little conversation with you after that. They're probably going to be in a little bit better frame of mind and mood and everything else for not only the rest of that day, but probably the next day. So it has an amazing power.
Yeah.
And we see that, we call them minor musical miracles. But we're used to it. We expect it. We see it happen all the time. And I'm pleased that I'm constantly surprised at seeing somebody do something I didn't think they were capable of doing. You just don't know until you go there and look for it and try it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it may work. And then
sometimes it doesn't, and then okay, you recover and you move on.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah. But you try. You keep trying.
And you look for it and you learn how to do that.
Yeah. How to tap into that.
Yeah.
So if others are on the journey and they're beginning, and a loved one, a parent, a spouse, a family member is going through dementia or the stages of that, or having to enter into caregiving, let's just go there, big picture caregiving. You had said taking care of yourself, understanding who your person is. To close us out, what would be the encouragement that, thinking of you when you first started out, what was it that you would have wanted somebody to be able to say this? Like, what would you say to someone just beginning that journey?
I think it's mostly turning the whole thing around so that you're not just constantly looking for dysfunction or problems or loss and things to grieve about. That's there. It's always going to be there. But you turn around and you consciously look for what else is there, what what can that person still do? What can we still have? What can we enjoy together? What can I do to connect with you and bring that out?
Yeah.
Rather than just cope with all of that difficulty and loss.
Yeah. That's a hard
Because,
frame.
well, because, I mean, you sort of think, okay, Alzheimer's, got a diagnosis of Alzheimer's, it's all over. That's the end. That's it. No, you live with dementia. That's why we don't call these people patients. These are persons.
Right.
Person, there's that word. These are persons living with dementia. Well, if they're living, and they're going to be living for a good while, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
How can we make that life as meaningful, enjoyable, comfortable, productive, as good a life as possible? It's not going to be as good as it was if you didn't have dementia.
Right.
I mean, that's pretty obvious. But what can we do? And once you start going down that path, you're just amazed at what you can do and what other people can do. And you got to get a lot of education. You got to get a lot of support. You got to get a lot of help. You know, but it's out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Wow. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for being on my podcast, for inviting me into your home, feeding me, giving me guitars too on my way out. I think that's an extra touch I've never had.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a beautiful gift. I really appreciate. I am grateful that you're here. Oh, and I wanted to say before I close out, holding in my hand, I definitely want to give credit where credit is due. I'm holding what would you call this? A sheet of stamps.
It's a sheet of stamps.
And it's Alzheimer's awareness. But these stamps were put into production after a 10-year 10-year plus advocacy effort that Linda and some others put together.
Primarily Linda. Linda's last name is Everman.
Linda Everman put together this process. Took 10 years to petition the government to.
She and a lady named Kathy Segans, who lives in Maryland.
And
it's a semi-postal stamp, which means there are only, Linda, 4 of those at a time. That the extra postage that you pay on each stamp goes directly to the NIH for research funds on dementia.
Yeah.
So it's a wonderful kind of a deal.
Yes. And I just think that's beautiful. And then you won an award, Person of the Year award for...
What was it, Caregiver of the Year? Or Advocate? What was
Advocate of the Year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just amazing work. And so if you wanted to get stamps that would give back to Alzheimer's research and care and programs, then you can find these stamps and you can order them online.
You can order them online. Some post offices carry them, but it's very easy to order them online. They come real fast.
Yeah. And it's a beautiful...
It's the only thing the post office delivers quickly, as far as I can tell.
There went the zinger for the payment. Well, thank you again for being with me and for taking time to talk about this. This is important work that you are doing, have been through, and are helping others know how to navigate. So I appreciate that. And thank you guys for listening, and we will see you next time.